Let's make my Southern Sparkle quilt pattern using layer cakes. Layer cakes are 10-inch squares. For this pattern, you will need a total of 42 10-inch squares, yielding a 51-inch by 59.5-inch quilt. First, you will take your 10-inch squares and create two piles. Pile 1 will have 20 10-inch squares, and pile 2 will have 22 10-inch squares. Set the 20 aside, and with the 22 10-inch squares, you will subcut them into two 5-inch by 10-inch rectangles. Keep your rectangular piles separate, like what I do here. Now to create this pattern, I am using the Perfect Rectangle Ruler by Creative Grids to create our half rectangles. I will have a link down below in the description. A portion will go towards helping out my channel. Also, I have simpler rectangle patterns available, and there are several more to come. This ruler will not be a one-time use here on this channel. Lastly, you don't need the ruler, as I will show you how to create half-square rectangles without a specialty ruler, but I deeply prefer it. If you'd like to skip the ruler portion, go to the timestamp on the screen to see how to create this quilt without using the ruler. With that said, here are our two piles of 5-inch by 10-inch rectangles. I recommend doing this as our rectangles will be cut in different directions, and you will need two matching prints in each pile to achieve my Southern Sparkle diamond block. First up, we'll take our left 5-inch by 10-inch rectangle pile, and pay close attention here. If you are using the ruler, place it upside down and line your edges with the ruler and slide it down to the 9-inch mark. Carefully make your cut and also cut the dog ears from the top. Then slide your ruler to the edge of the bottom and cut the dog ear off the bottom. If you have a rotating mat, rotate your blocks around and repeat this step to the other side. Your half rectangle line will go from the bottom left to the top right corner. Next, with your right pile of 5-inch by 10-inch rectangle, once again pay close attention. Use the ruler right side up and line your edges with it and slide it down once again to the 9-inch mark. Carefully make your cut and cut the dog ears off the top, and once again slide your ruler to the edge of the bottom to cut the bottom dog ear off. Rotate your blocks around and repeat this step to the other side. Your half rectangle line will be going from the bottom right corner to the top left corner. And that's it for the ruler. You'll see the triangle forming within your cuts. Then you'll lay your cut pieces side by side and repeat this step to all of your 5-inch by 10-inch rectangles. Here I have all of my pieces cut using the ruler, which I'll show you how to create your block next. I did set a few 5-inch by 10-inch rectangles aside, as I will show you how to create that same block without the ruler afterwards. But first, with your remaining 10-inch squares, you will trim them down to a 9-inch square. Then continuing with our half rectangle pieces, rotate your blocks around to form a triangle. Now we will sew everything together with a 1/4-inch seam allowance. With those dog ears cut off, you will lay your pieces right sides together, and your dog ears will line up perfectly in place with your other rectangle piece. Sew them together and it will leave you with a 4 3/4-inch by 9-inch rectangle. We will sew those rectangles together to create a 9-inch triangular block. Then to create our diamond block, you will need to make two of the exact same block. You will sew your pieces together to form half rectangles, then sew your rectangles to form another triangle block. Then you will take those matching blocks and create a diamond by placing one upside down, leaving you with a 9-inch by 17.5-inch rectangle. You'll repeat these steps until you have made a total of 11 diamond quilt blocks. Now I will show you how to create the same block without using the ruler. Keeping those piles separate, on the wrong side you will draw a diagonal from corner to corner. With one of your 5-inch by 10-inch rectangles, your diagonal line will go from bottom right to the top left corner. Using a matching print, you'll repeat this step, but to the opposite side, meaning drawing your line from the bottom left to the top right corner. Once again, our diagonal line directions are very important in creating our quilt block. Using the rectangle with the diagonal line from the bottom left to the top right corner, place it on top of another 5" by 10" rectangle, right sides together like so. It will sort of look like a crosshatch, but make sure your corners match, and then you'll sew a 1/4" seam allowance on both sides of that line you just drew. For myself, this is a little awkward, so you might want to pin your pieces together to help you out. Next, cut on the line you just drew with a rotary cutter or a pair of fabric scissors and press your blocks open. No matter what, you now have to trim your blocks down. And this is where I personally struggle. Where your diagonal lines line up on the corners, they need to be a 1/4" away. This is because we do sew with a 1/4" seam allowance, and no matter what I do, I always end up trimming my blocks to a 4.5" by 9" rectangle. Creating your blocks without the ruler will yield you a slightly smaller quilt, but do take your time with this part. As you can see here, it does take me a bit to line everything up. That's why I prefer to using the rectangular ruler. Now we will create another half rectangle, but in the opposite direction, using the rectangle with the diagonal line from bottom right to the top left corner. Place it on top of another 5" by 10" rectangle, right sides together. You will once again get a crosshatch and make sure your corners match up. Then sew a 1/4" seam allowance on both sides of the line you drew. You'll cut on the line that you drew, and no matter what, trim your blocks down to a 4.5" by 9" rectangle. Using the blocks we created, we will make 2 matching triangular blocks by sewing them together, leaving you with a 8.5" block. This also means with your plain print squares, instead of trimming them down to a 9" square, you will need to trim them down to the exact same size as your triangular blocks. This will create a 8.5" block. But continuing with our blocks, you will place your blocks into a diamond shape and sew your blocks together to create a 8.5" by 16.5" rectangle. Repeat these steps until you have made a total of 11 diamond quilt blocks. Now that all of your blocks are complete, it is time to lay your quilt out. And for your odd rows, you will start with a diamond block, then 2 print squares, ending with a diamond quilt block. For your even rows, you will start with 2 print blocks, 1 diamond block, and end with 2 print blocks. You'll create a total of 7 rows, and as always, sew your blocks together to form rows, and lastly, sew those rows together to complete your quilt top. Here is what my Southern Sparkle quilt pattern looks like all finished. For the backing, I am using a matching print from within the collection. Then I am going with glide threads in the color Military Gold for my thread choice. And stay to the end to see a full photo since this quilt has a large repeating pattern. And here is what my quilt looks like all quilted. Once again, one layer cake will yield you a 51" by 59.5" quilt if you plan on using the half rectangular ruler, or you will yield a 48" by 56" quilt without the ruler. But if you could please take a moment to hit that like and subscribe button, hit that notification bell so you can be notified for your next amazing quilt project.